Hello everyone, I'm here to do my wrap-up for the month of January 2026. It's already gone, the first month of the year. And I have read quite a lot this month. I have read 12 books and over 3,000 pages, which is pretty good for me. And yeah, work was slow, so that helps. And I was still working from home quite a bit, which also helps, not having to commute. So it allowed me to read quite a bit. And yeah, I'm excited to talk about it with you. So the first book that I read was A Heart So White by Javier Marias, which is a modern classic. It follows this woman that is married and is going through some kind of trauma, reliving PTSD sort of thing, and her mom died and her dad has a little bit of a past, as he had 3 wives and all of them died, and it's a little bit of a mystery trying to figure out if that was intentional or it just happened, or what kind of happened with that situation. And this woman kind of gets very involved into finding out the truth at some point. I enjoyed it more than I thought I was going to. Sometimes these classics are very manly, and this had some of it, but it was also quite interesting, especially in the way that the relationships were portrayed, and the approach was quite modern for when this was written. So very happy that I read that. Then the next book that I read is An Arcane Inheritance by Kamilah Cole, which is a fantasy. I got this as a proof from NetGalley, so thank you to NetGalley and the publisher for letting me read this. And this is basically about a girl that goes to study, like a dark academia. She goes to study into this university. She's black, and when she goes there, it's a very wide environment, especially like this fraternity and these like special clubs where one of her famous professors is, and she's very interested in this professor. So she manages to get an invitation from another student that she originally hates, and it's a very, I would say, very classical take on this kind of story. There was nothing super crazily inventive about this, but it was well written. I enjoyed it. It had some good points about the way that universities and academia treat different races and different people from different backgrounds. But yeah, nothing groundbreaking, but enjoyable nonetheless. The next book that I finished is Death of the Author by Nnedi Okorafor, and this was again a bit of a fantasy. It is following an author, a science fiction author that is in a wheelchair due to an accident when she was young, and we see like she's from Nigerian heritage, but she's American, and so we see like the two cultures clashing together. And then we also follow this book that she's writing, science fiction books. She normally had written like academic and literary books before, but when she loses her job, she starts writing this very epic science fiction book, and we follow, like, parts of it are the book and parts of it are her story. Like, I don't know if you can see, this is one font and then this is the other font. So the normal font, like the Times New Roman, is the actual story of this author, and the other one is like the book that she's writing. And the two things kind of start merging into one. There is, because of her paralysis, she decides to try some new technology that is kind of like integrated in her book as well. And her sci-fi book does gain a very big fan base, and then there is also like considerations of what her decisions mean for the fans of that book and what it says to the fans of those books. So there is a whole conversation about fame and what famous people do and don't do, and how that affects a bigger, wider picture. The role of technology in disability and sort of that area as well. And I also really liked the family relationships and the cultural relationships that allowed for. That conversation I found very appealing. But yeah, the turn that it took the second half or so of the book was not my favorite, and the main character is a fairly unlikable character, which I can read about, but especially in this kind of stories, I always prefer my characters to be a little bit more likable. So I enjoyed this. I think it's a good book, but yeah, it also had its flaws. The next book I read is Sorrowland by Rebecca Solnit, and this follows a person that was kind of in a cult, and it's like a religious cult in the forest, and they are kind of against technology and all of that, and they marry their kids very young, and they I think they can take several wives as well, that kind of thing. And this person, she's supposed to be a girl, and she was married I think at 16 or 15, 16, and then she was pregnant with twins, and she decided to leave to give them a better life, and we see the process of her living, and how hard and brainwashing that she has to do, and also like the questioning of who she really is or who they really are, because she's feeling some changes in her body, and she meets people along the way that help her understand what's happening to her and understand herself better, and we see like that whole process. And even though she has not received any support and she has been very alone for a lot of this book, we also see her commitment to help other people, which is really nice to see. Yeah, I really enjoyed this. I think it was a little bit confusing at times the way that the story was told, because we went back and forth, and it was difficult to follow sometimes who was who and when what happened, kind of thing. But after a while, it becomes more clear and it's easier to follow. And I think it was a very interesting concept. I think the atmosphere, maybe it was a little bit too dark and sinister for my personal liking, but I think that's a main thing, not a book thing, and I will definitely be interested in reading more from this author. The next book I finished was Bestiary by K-Ming Chang, and this follows a family that is moving from China to the US, and especially the younger girl in this family. When she moves to the US, she starts feeling different about herself, and in magical realism style she starts getting a tiger tail, that is like a representation of those changes for her. She's also getting really close to one of her neighbors in more than a just friends kind of way, and we kind of explore all those differences of culture and of sexuality, and like a coming of age story. I think it was well done. I also think it was very standard. I have read this kind of thing before, maybe not the specifics with the magical realism, but the overall of the story felt very familiar to me, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it was just like nothing super impressive for me personally. So I don't think it's a fault of the book or it's a bad book, it's just not the most original. The next book I finished this month is Fowl, Eulogies by Lucie Rico, and I really enjoyed this. This is about a woman. At the beginning of the book, her mom dies, and so she decides to go back to her village and figure out what to do with her mom's farm. She had a chicken farm, and she's trying to figure out what to do because she's vegetarian. She's very much attached to the city. She has this very modern style of life, and going back and killing chickens for a living doesn't seem like the kind of thing she would want to do. But once she's there, she starts forming this relationship with the chickens, and she still decides to kill them and sell them, but she treats them humanly, and she starts doing this thing that she writes an eulogy for each chicken that she kills, and she kills the chicken in a way that she thinks they would have not necessarily like, but in a way that it's humane and tailored to them specifically. and we followed her developing this kind of relationship the first half of the book, and then on the second half of the book we follow her trying to trust this neighbor from the village that wants to go into business with her, and because she's kind of successful with these eulogies, people seem to be liking this, and so they try to make this into a bigger thing, to treat the chickens humanly, but the bigger it gets, the more of the soul of the idea is lost, and it's a commentary on current farming practices, and I think it was very poignant. And I think also that it's not gore at all, like we barely see the killing of the chickens, but it is able to show us how inhumane this whole process is without having to be gore and gross, and I really appreciate that. I think it was very, very well done. I really recommend. I think it's a brilliant book. The next book that I finished is Migrations by Charlotte McConaghy, and this is Charlotte McConaghy, I think, has been having like a resurgence of fame with Wild Dark Shore. I haven't read that one, but I wanted to read this one, partly because of Haircut and partly because that's the one that my library has, and this is about a woman that joins this boat that normally catches fish, in this like alternative future. Most animals, wildlife is dying. There is this one last set of birds that is migrating from the Arctic to the Antarctic, and there is also this one last set of fish that this boat is chasing, and so she joins them trying to follow the last migration of these birds from the Arctic to the Antarctic. And it is for scientific purposes. She's not a scientist, but her husband was, and so she kind of has some knowledge and some reason for doing this. And fairly on in the book we also know that she was in prison for killing people, but we don't know what happened, and we don't know who she killed, and so we kind of follow the present timeline in which she's in this boat, and there is so many environmental things going on. The government is trying to ban any kind of interaction with the animals to try to preserve the little that is left, and at the same time they are trying to follow these animals, but it's a fishing vessel which is not allowed anymore, and there is a lot of talk about the environmental impact in this world. And then in the past timeline we follow her in her life, her childhood and coming of age, and her husband, and we kind of trying to build up the tension to see what happened, and because we know that she killed someone and we know that she was in prison, and we want to know why that happened, who it was, what was the circumstances around that, and it kind of builds that mystery and that tension until the end of the book, so you really want to keep reading, and you really want to know what's going to happen. I think the way that the book was built, it was very smart, because it is very compelling, and also it's a climate fiction at the end, but it doesn't feel preachy, which a lot of climate fiction does. It's just showing the reality of the fact that animals don't exist anymore, or what these wild animals don't exist anymore, and what that does to the world and to us. And I really enjoy the book for both of those reasons. I do have to say that the main character, Franny, is quite unlikable, and again, it's not necessarily a bad thing. I do enjoy books with unlikable characters. They just don't tend to be my favorite books, so I enjoyed this one. It's not my favorite, but I quite enjoyed it. I think it was, like, in the craft section, it was very, very well written. The next book that I finished is Mouse by Art Spiegelman, which is a graphic novel. I think it's quite a classic graphic novel. I think it was written in the 80s, and it's about the author's father, who was a Jew in Poland, and he went to Auschwitz and had to deal with the Nazis and the Holocaust. The way that this is written is the son, so Art Spiegelman goes to visit his father at regular intervals, and we see how he is at the moment of writing, which is the 80s, and then he tells his story back from the concentration camps, and how not only the concentration camps, but how slowly the tension rised. Like at the beginning of the book, he was marrying this very wealthy woman, Jew woman, and starting a factory, and then slowly, the factory goes back to the government, and then they are not allowed to live just anywhere anymore, so they lose their houses, they lose their furniture, and they lose their jobs, and slowly they build up into sending them to the concentration camps. It was not a thing of normal life concentration camp. There, like, all that build up is also in this book, and I found that part quite interesting to read. I think that a lot of World War II stories and concentration camp stories get very manipulative and emotional at this point in time, but this was written a long time ago, and I think that helps. And I think also the fact that it's just the story of a person that lived through that also helps. I think this reads a little bit more like Anne Frank's diaries, which obviously is not trying to be emotionally manipulative. It's just an account of what happened, which is horrible and all that. So I think in that sense this is doing a good job. I do think that it's funny because at some point it discusses that the portrayal of the father, because the author thinks that the father is not coming across very good. He's coming across as like a hoarder and like very stingy and like the stereotypical Jew, and he thinks like, oh, I don't want to put the stereotypical Jew in this kind of story, but that's how he is, so that's how I should put it. What he doesn't address is the fact that he's a horrible son. He's very dismissive of his dad. He's not very loving towards him at all. Like, there's points when he's struggling through illness and through divorce and through the loss of the author's mother, and he kind of just tells him, get a grip, shut up, and tell me your story so that I can make this comic. And that's really really messed up, and that's not addressed. So yeah, I didn't like the author as a person. I think the story is well written, especially the past timeline. The present timeline, it just makes everyone really unlikable, and really, like, not just unlikable, really problematic. And yeah, it's also very manly and very all the time and all of that stuff. So yeah, a little bit dated, but still important. The next book that I finished was Build Your House Around My Body by Violet Kupersmith, and this is the story of a couple of people. Mostly we follow people that are from American and Vietnamese descent in Vietnam. So it kind of follows the post-war timeline in which a lot of American soldiers did have children with Vietnamese women. Some of them recognized, some of them not, and kind of like that set of culture in Vietnam that is now a reality. And we followed one person in, I think it's around the war, and the other one in present time, that disappeared from their houses, and how those two stories are connected. And I thought it was okay. I found the writing style not that compelling. I think that the story itself and the context and the commentary were very nice, but the way it was written is very normal and very not noticeable at all, not in a compelling way, but just the story is there and that's it kind of way. So it was fine for me. Unfortunately, a lot of people in my online book club really like this, and I think it's okay. The next book that I finished was The Beginning Comes After the End, Notes on a World of Change by Rebecca Solnit, which was also approved copy that I got from NetGalley. So again, thank you to NetGalley and the publishers to let me read this book. And this was just a set of essays about the current world, climate change, the policies and politics and politicians that we have at the moment, gender, polarization, war, all of those kind of things. I thought that the opinions and ideas are valuable and they are aligned with what I think about the world. This didn't change my view on anything very much, probably because I already aligned, but it also didn't give me a lot of tools to discuss these things. And I thought it was very messy, the way that everything was kind of mixed together. You could be talking about climate change in one paragraph, and then the next paragraph was about some, I don't know, very niche artist somewhere discussing about copyright. Like it was very random. It didn't feel very well structured to me. I understand that all of these things are connected, but still, like, the connections were very weak and not very well lined out in these essays. And at the end of the book, I just don't know what value this had in my life. So yeah, it reminds me a little bit about how I feel about like Jenni Okorafor or Annie Ernaux. I do agree with their ideas at their points, but the way they deliver them is not necessarily something that resonates with me or gives me anything at all. So yes, probably it is from someone out there, but that someone is not me. Editing Paula here. So I realized I forgot to talk about one book. That's the last book that I read, that I finished yesterday, and that was Eve by Rebecca O'Connor, which was also a proof that NetGalley gave me. Thank you for everything. And I really like this. So this is a myth retelling of Adam and Eve's story from Eve's perspective. So we follow basically from the creation of Eve, sort of, until like they get kicked off paradise, and then like the children and all of that. And it was just very refreshing and interesting. Like I'm not religious, my family is not religious, so I've read the Bible once because I don't know, I was kind of interested to read. Not the greatest read in the world, in my opinion, but I've never grown up believing these things, or I know the bare basics because I live in a Christian society, even a Catholic society, but not because my close network talked to me about it or anything. So I'm sure I lost a lot of details that this book was talking into, but I thought it was a really interesting take on it. One of the women said something to the likes of, well, it was not the original sin that you ate that fruit, it was the original sign of rebellion against a system that tells us that we shouldn't do things that there is no reason why we shouldn't do, and stupid rules that men put in place. And I thought that was very cool. So yeah, I really enjoyed this book. Again, maybe the writing style was nothing impressive, but I think that the originality of the story really made up for it. And I really enjoyed the concept, and I really enjoyed the executions. And then the last book that I finished this month is Ootlin by Jenni Fagan, and this is a memoir. The author is an author, like a fiction novel author. She has written several books, and I am very curious to pick any of those up. Now that I have read this, I haven't read any of them. I picked up this because it was longlisted for the Women's Prize for Non-Fiction last year, and it's a memoir of the author growing up in the care system in the UK, and it follows her from the age of 0 to the age of 16. Obviously there is some creative licenses taken, especially at the beginning. Not because it's untrue that she went through all of her care files to get this information, but the way that it is written is like, I felt this and this was the greatest thing in my life, and obviously she didn't think that when she was 1 year old. But yeah, it's still like a very harrowing story. Not every single time, every single year of her life was bad, but there was a lot of bad years. There was a lot of abuse. There was a lot of insecurity in her life. She was moved every 3 months. She couldn't make any connections with anybody. She couldn't have friends. She even the times that she was in houses that she liked with people that she liked and made her feel safe, she was moved, so it was never permanent, and that led her to have a lot of issues later on in life. She had depression, of course, but also she was smoking by the age of like 7 or 8. She was doing drugs when she was a bit older than that, not much older than that. She had a very extensive criminal record when she was a teenager, so she definitely had a very trouble upbringing, and we clearly see where all those troubles come from. It's not like intrinsic in her necessarily, but we also see that she did have the potential, and obviously she has realized that potential, and she talks briefly about all the years of therapy that took. But yeah, it definitely shows issues that exist with the care system. I don't know if it's better now, I hope it is. But yes, it is very harrowing and very raw, and very brave of her to write something like this. I'm very happy that I read it, and it did spark some thoughts in me. I'm not sure exactly what I can do about it, but I think everyone deserves someone that believes in them and think that there is something good inside them, especially when they're children. And many of these children don't have that, so it was very harrowing to read. So yeah, those are all the books that I read this month. I think a pretty good month. Like most of them, there was nothing that I hated. I think most of the books I enjoyed to one level or other. I think my favorites are definitely these two, Ootlin and Fowl eulogies. I think they are quite different books, but they are all quite different books, but they are both dealing with important issues in very different ways. But I enjoy them both very much, so I'm happy I read them. Let me know if you have read any of these books or if you are interested in any of these books. And until next video, bye!